Mr. John Couvillon is president, CEO, head guy in charge at GMC Enterprises, polling, etc. Hey, Mr. John, welcome back to KEEL. Thanks for taking time for us.
It's good to be here this morning.
So, before we get down to voter turnout and is there anything new behind the curtain? Any new Shreveport numbers that are kind of secret you can tell us about, or am I just shooting in the dark here?
Shooting in the dark.
Rats. Nobody's called you on the phone after your last appearance, after your last poll, and said, you did such a great job. We want to hire you again to get us new, more up-to-date numbers. Nothing at all?
Well, I'll tell you, it would be interesting to see how the race is evolving at this point. But no, nothing as of yet.
The Kennedy poll showed that
Ollie at 35.
The two Republicans could not beat her if they made it into a runoff. That the only person that could beat her was Adrian Perkins. Do you agree with that?
I'll just say this. The challenge that any Republican has running in the city of Shreveport is that you're talking about a black electorate that's about 50%. So if you want to be able to win, that does mean you have to get black crossover votes.
So basically, like I said to Mr. Kennedy last week, if the numbers hold true and Ollie's number 1, Savage and Talaferro 2, 3, 3, 2, and Perkins number 3, suddenly
number 4.
4 rather, sorry. Suddenly Adrian Perkins becomes a very important person, doesn't he?
If he were within the statistical range of making the runoff, yes, because in the hypothetical situation you described, what becomes interesting then is that the white vote becomes the vote worth getting, because the blacks would presumably split down the middle, and all of a sudden who would get the majority of the white/conservative vote would be the one who wins the runoff, if you were talking about a scenario with 2 black Democrats.
Okay. Early voting, 2 more days, today and tomorrow. Secretary of State's reporting over 140,000 people have voted. I think that was as of Thursday night. What does that number tell you?
So what the number, and by the way, I have updated numbers as of last night, 215,000. And let me put you this way, very rarely am I impressed by early voting numbers, but for a statewide election where midterm election, rather, where you've not had a Senate race on the ballot since 2006. The fact that you have 215,000 who've early voted already, and by the way, I looked at the numbers in Caddo and Bossier. They also are pretty strong as well. To put 215,000 in perspective, and that's after 5 days, that is the 8th highest early vote ever, and that's still not even counting Monday and Tuesday early voting. I think there's a very real possibility that by the time early voting's finished Tuesday night, there's going to be 1 or 2 records that will be broken. The one record I think definitely be broken will be the percent of people who cast their votes early. I think it could be around 30%. The other vote record that I think could be broken for non-presidential elections, theoretically this election we could be outvoting those who voted for early voted for governor or Senate, which to me is pretty impressive for something where the Secretary of State's office is at the top of the ballot.
Let me ask you this. The early voting also helps you guys project turnout. The Secretary of State
Yes.
saying that it could be as high as 35% voter turnout. You agree?
I think it could be 40.
Really?
Yes. I have a model that I've been running every day after I get each new set of early voting numbers in. And, it's kind of funny. In the beginning, I actually had a back and forth with a reporter back in Baton Rouge who was questioning my sanity for saying there was even going to be 30% voter turnout. But the early voting numbers are so strong, I think that a 35 or even a 40% turnout is a possibility. The key will be how strong it finishes today and tomorrow. Historically, for Tuesday elections, you do have an uptick because, of course, procrastinators realize, hey, I got 2 days left to early vote. I better go do it. So there's a very real possibility you could see 300,000 people early voting at the close of Tuesday night.
John, it's sort of the assumption that early voting favors Democrats, at least nationwide. Does that hold true for Louisiana in your mind?
To be honest with you, it depends on the election, and I'll tell you why. Just to give you a couple of examples, in the Senate runoff, the one where Foster Campbell faced John Kennedy, you had a very weak Democratic turnout with 21% black statewide. In the Mary Landrieu race, she did an excellent job of getting a black early vote out. It was 31% black. So it really just depends on the election and or the candidate. I think that kind of conventional wisdom that you just mentioned was born out of the 2008 Obama presidency, where he and his organizers did an excellent job of getting Democrats out to the polls that year. And in several states, McCain actually carried the election day vote while losing the early vote so heavily. And I'm thinking about Iowa and Colorado, to use two examples, that the early vote very much mattered back then.
Let me ask you this. I don't know if you can hone in on Shreveport or not, but you say statewide turnout you projecting could be 40%. What about here in our mayor's race? Could we get close to 50%?
It's possible because, just to give you an example, I see this election as being analogous to the 2016 Senate runoff. So as of Saturday night, 7,800 people in Caddo Parish have early voted. And in the entire Senate runoff, 7,200 early voted. So you could easily see a situation where turnout is 20 to 30% higher than it was in the Senate race. And by the way, Bossier is similarly seeing strong early voting numbers. I think some of that is what's going on is attributable to the fallout from the Kavanaugh hearings.
John, nationwide, the big story is, can the Dems take the House? Can the Democrats take back the House of Representatives? In this part of the state, there's not really a lot of the House seats aren't really up for grabs. Are there any hotly contested House seats elsewhere across the state we should be looking at?
The only one that, to me, that really closely, that even remotely qualifies as worth watching is the one down in southwest Louisiana, where incumbent Clay Higgins has quite a few opponents, a couple of whom have money to spend. The thing that is saving him, though, is that he has President Trump's enthusiastic support, and he hasn't done anything especially wrong. But that would be the only race where there's a remote possibility of there being a December runoff.